Hello, pretty.
Names is for tombstones, baby.
That is not my dog.
Welcome to this episode of The Good, the Bad and the Odd with your host Mark. Today I'd like to talk about the TV series The Walking Dead.
Fear, confusion, all those things. I felt like I've been ripped out of my life, put somewhere else. For a while I thought I was trapped in some dream. Something I might not wake up from.
I love you.
One thing I know with certainty, we're moving on. Atlanta's done.
I'll be mainly focusing on Series 2, which I've just finished, but I'll also refer back to Series 1. And I'm going to be putting spoilers in here. I'll talk about it generally first couple of minutes, and then we'll get into more detail, at which point there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, feel free to listen to the first few minutes, but I would shut it off after that, especially if you're intending to see it. Okay, overall, this TV series is rather fine, I would say. It's got a very, very nice look and feel. The tone of it is really suitable to the material and keeps you quite engaged. It's rather oppressive and grim, but there's moments of lightness, but most of all, it's rather tense. If you want something similar, I'd say probably a 24, something like that. The setting's rather good. It's set in America. It's about a zombie apocalypse. It's about survivors trying to make it. And it's a difficult subject, this, because you can either have them constantly being attacked and always surrounded and always under pressure, which can be very, very samey. It's okay for a movie, I think, but it doesn't work for TV. Or you can have them in safe havens where the drama gets to play out, which if you let it go on too long, and I think was a problem with Series 1 in places, it can get a bit, well, this is supposed to be about zombies, where are they? But if you also have them put in situations where they encounter zombies on a reasonably frequent basis, or have to go into areas where zombies could be, that kind of balance works well, and they've struck that quite well in Series 2, I think. One thing I do like about it is the sort of colour palette. It's very consistent. It's the first series. I think the first part of Series 2 was made by Frank Darabont, who's probably most famously associated with Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, and it's got that kind of look about it, and it suits it. You know, there's lots of emphasis on greens and browns and more muted colours. There's not many very bright colours, and even the attacks with the zombies, which can be quite grim and graphic and grisly, they've toned it down. The blood doesn't look bright red, it looks dark, for example. Another good thing about it is the zombie makeup's really, really fine. Almost universally they get it right. Occasionally you get to see a zombie whose makeup looks like something out of more monstrous. It's kind of like an Evil Dead 2 kind of makeup, but that usually it's pretty good. In terms of acting, it's an interesting series. It's like the four main leads kind of act melodramatically quite a lot of the time, and that I'm talking about Rick, Shane, Laurie, and to some degree Andrea. Andrea does dial it down the rest of the time, whereas most of the other actors kind of are much more naturalistic and a more conventional actor job, and they do it rather well. And even with the four I've mentioned, I have to say I think Rick and Shane, it kind of suits them because they're making hard decisions all the time. I don't really like Laurie anyway, but I find her kind of changeable and hysterical tone a bit tiresome. I can understand it when she's talking about her husband putting himself at risk, but she seems to carry it on all the time, and it can be a bit tiresome. But overall, the acting is rather fine in my opinion. In terms of scripting, I think they've really hit an excellent narrative with season 2. It wasn't bad in season 1, like I said, but I think it dipped a little into just constant soap opera drama, a little, especially in episode 3 and 4. But even so, I've watched it a second time now, and I feel it way less than I used to after watching it the first time. That this is a problem. Season 1, which is only 6 episodes and really worth watching, it is better the second time actually. And the first time I saw it, I was really blown away by episode 1 and 2 of that, and the final episode. But it's well worth watching season 1. Getting on to season 2. The plot lines they've chosen are really good. There is one plot line where they're looking for a little girl called Sophia that I think if you're watching it week by week would get a little wearing. It's like, oh god, well, why don't they just find her, kind of thing would be my thinking. But when you watch it back to back like I have, it's not half as wearing, and you're fine with it, and it gives some of the characters a chance to be put into desperate situations because they're looking for someone. That's kind of cool, and I can see why they did it. Mostly, also, I'd say almost always the script in the drama arises out of the situations kind of naturally. It's not contrived, like in a soap opera, to create drama. You understand, because of the things they do. It feels natural. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel soap opera. Though there are some elements in season 2 where I think it is a little contrived, and it looks like they put in entire plot lines to just pad out a few episodes a little. Though they do make sense in the scheme of things. I'm trying to avoid spoilers now. Let's say that's the end of the non-spoiler part. And overall, I'll give you my overall rating now. Overall, I'd give this a 90 out of 100. I think it's a really terrific TV series. To be fair, I haven't watched many other TV series, and there are some good, but the ones I have seen are rather good. But this just really sells itself well. Rather enjoyable. It's very grisly. It's really suitable for adults and quite older teens. But I think it's rather good, and as I say, I'll give it 90 out of 100. Right, to go into more spoilerific kind of content. An example of one of the plot lines that I think appears a little contrived is they catch a guy that's from a gang that is they basically have a shootout with, but they're not quite sure why. It's a chap called Randall, and then they capture him, patch him up because he's really hurt his leg. They rescue him from zombies. They don't just leave him. But once they've caught him, they start having like an internal debate about what should they do with him, and all sorts of morals and ethics come up in it, which in and of itself is interesting, but it does feel a bit contrived. They're trying to force the pace of what survival is going to be all about in this world. It doesn't actually need to be forced. It would just come naturally. They try and decide what to do with him over a couple of episodes. Another problem, and these are minor problems I think compared to how good I think the series is some of the characters are quite clearly underdeveloped. They barely get any dialogue. They don't really get to do much, and you can kind of tell they're going to be zombie fodder. In fact, it doesn't turn out quite that way. Some of them do and some of them don't, but you can kind of tell the fact that they get barely any mentions. It means you're gonna, they're appearing to be like the red shirts in Star Trek. That's kind of how they're appearing. In terms of the characters, the ones I really like, Rick is obviously a really good character, and Shane really needs to be there. In terms of I would say those two are fine as is. As I say, they can be acting melodramatic, but I think that's Shane's nature. Sway is very intense and tries to see things in black and white. He thinks to do things for the good of the group, and is especially fixated on looking after Carl at whatever cost. But that suits him. But and Rick is often put into very hard situations, so I can understand it. Other characters I really like, the older guys, Dow, who was in season 1 and 2, who's the older sort of grandpa figure of the group. I also quite like Herschel, who's head of the farm, who's not quite thinking right, but for example, he's keeping walkers in the barn because he believes they may be sick rather than dead. But there's a very good scene where Shane demonstrates clearly that they're dead rather than sick by just unloading a gun in one while he's talking, and it just carry on relentlessly, even though he's just shooting through the heart and stuff like that. I rather like Glenn, who's the younger one in the group, almost the gopher. He goes and gets stuff done, and his love interest with Maggie. Maggie, I think, is a really good character. Herschel and Maggie are the really standout ones from the farm. Really like Daryl, actually. Daryl's really good. He's like the loner of the group, but he's very effective. He's a hunter. He uses a crossbow. He knows what he's doing. And interestingly, I quite like his brother Merle, who was only in the first season briefly and makes an almost... Well, it's like a hallucination sequence in season 2, but he's really quite an interesting character. He's a racist, he's kind of stupid, but he's capable as well, and I'd kind of like to see more of him. And I've heard he's kind of written in some way in season 3. Apparently not a hallucination this time, it is the real one. The real one could well be out there with one hand missing, having to cut off his own hand to escape handcuffs which Rick put him in, and somehow the situation was such that he couldn't be rescued. There were some really, really outstanding bits in season 2. Really, there was little sections in season 2 that just were terrific scenes, and I'll just list a few of them. Well, I'll list all the ones that I think are just exceptionally good. In season 2, I think in the first episode, I could be wrong, it could be the second one, the first episode, they first encounter a really big swarm. I think they called it a horde. Basically, a huge troop of marching zombies that come through a set of cars, and they have to hide among the cars to let the zombies pass. This is rather cool, and the comics kind of explain it. I should say I read the comics for this, and I've read them all once through, and I'm reading them again right now, trying to kind of keep pace with the series this time, the TV show this time. And in that, they explain the hordes. There's one zombie walking, and it might bump into another zombie, and because the first one's moving in some way, the second one will latch onto the movement and start following, and so on and so on, and they just more and more bump into other zombies, and they'll just start following because they haven't got any mind to do anything else. And then if there's a noise over here, they might all turn in that direction, and there's sort of always these larger and larger groups will be forming, walking across the countryside or through the cities. It's kind of an interesting idea, and it works really well. Another sort of breathtaking scene in season 2 is the part where Carl, the boy, gets shot. That really was a surprise. Even though I'd read the comic books and he gets shot in that, I just, it just took my breath away because I just didn't expect it. There's a bit. Now we're getting into real spoilers. Just to give you one more warning, the next one that really shocked me was where Otis, who shot Carl and felt bad about it, and Shane have to go and get some equipment and stuff to try and rescue Carl because he's been shot, and they're trying to escape from zombies, and they're both kind of injured and going slow, and Shane takes the decision, basically damns himself, takes the decision to shoot Otis so Otis gets eaten but he can get away, and his justification to himself for doing that is he's saving Carl, not himself. That was quite a shock, and it obviously affects him through the series. He gets hardened right up, and there's Otis kind of tries to grab him and pulls out part of his hair, and after that, once he gets back to the camp, the farm, he shaves his head, which is kind of symbolic of shedding his old humanity, to me anyway. No one else really latches onto that. But as the series go on, they start having suspicions, particularly Dale, that Otis didn't just die bravely. He believed that Shane shot him to get away. And more and more people start believing that, seeing how Shane behaves. The section where you first discover the walkers in the barn is quite a shock, though fairly minor compared to the other ones on this list. That's a fun and important one. But then it precipitates once they find out that it causes a lot of tension in the group that aren't living in the farm. And Shane precipitates it by saying, right, well, let's see how this really goes down, because he finds Rick and Herschel and one of the other guys trying to get some zombies into the barn rather than just killing them, and it drives Shane nuts, because it is stupid. It is stupid thing to be risking your life doing. And to precipitate things, Shane busts the barn open and lets out all the zombies, which is really sort of kind of devastating scene. It looks like a massacre. I know they're zombies, but it looks like a massacre. But the real clincher here, the real gutter, is the little girl they've been looking for, Sophia. Particularly Daryl, who's really invested in trying to find this little girl. It's obviously feels like some sort of redemption for him. The last zombie out is the little girl they're looking for, Sophia, and that really, it's really quite devastating after watching the series this long. The next really excellent scene where lots of some very dramatic happens is Herschel takes to drinking after this, and they have to go and get him from a bar, but a couple of guys turn up. I think they're called Dave and Tony, and start sort of shooting the breeze, but they keep asking, have you got a fire around here then? Are you holed up? And stuff like that. And as the scene goes on, that Herschel and Rick and Glenn, who's also in the bar with them, are getting more and more nervous. Rick knows what's going down. I don't think Herschel and Glenn do, but he knows these guys are more than they appear to be. And then slowly, as they're talking, they start positioning themselves in different parts of the bar, which you would do if you were going to shoot some people. And Rick realises what's going down and basically kills them, and then also puts bullets in their heads, which is a foretaster of what is an end of season reveal in series 2, which isn't much of a reveal, which is he tells them that the doctor told Rick tells everyone the doctor at the end of season 1 tells Rick that everyone's basically infected. You don't have to be bitten. As soon as you die, you become a zombie. Though I think I tried to think back on this. I was trying to think, have we seen that anyway? But the fact that Rick puts a double shot, does the double tap from Zombieland to the dead guys, kind of indicates he knows this. That's a foreshadowing. Well, he does know. He was told. There's a foreshadowing of it, that reveal. And then finally, the last really significant scene, I think, is the final overrun of the barn, where zombies just start coming out, and they have to try and protect farm. They have to try and protect the farm, and people start dying and all sorts happens. Those scenes in particular are real standouts. There's also some kind of interesting drama going on. Shane is obviously descended into hell for reasons he believes are good, and sometimes he makes perfect sense. They're doing stupid things here, risky things unnecessarily, but other times, he just wants to leave Sophia, stop looking for Sophia, because he knows she's dead. Whereas everyone else wants to keep hope, and it means something to them. And once the reveal about Sophia happens, Daryl in particular takes it quite badly, but he doesn't leave the group. He just camps out on his own, eating these squirrels and stuff like that. The other interesting things in the whole season, I think, is the romance between Glenn and Maggie is quite sweet. It's the one bright spot, I think, in the whole series. There's some interesting things going on with the boy Carl. He's obviously, he's absorbing information from both Rick and Shane, and he's got a darkness and hardness. He's got a growing darkness and hardness about him, even though he's a little boy. That I think Laurie notices and Rick starts to notice. Though they've got more on their mind, but it could be setting up some interesting drama down the road. And as I mentioned, I really like Daryl's evolution as a character. There's almost a whole episode dedicated to him where he gets injured looking for Sophia in the woods, has to fight off zombies. He's semi-conscious and he's hallucinating about more. I really like that episode. It didn't do much in terms of driving the story, but I just thought it's a really good episode, and he's an interesting character, and he's a great actor, has to be said. Really good. There were other things about this series I didn't like. I've already mentioned I didn't like Laurie's. I don't like Laurie at all, really, as a character. This is a problem. She's melodramatic, but one thing that really bothers me is she's kind of inconsistent. One minute she'll be sort of saying to Shane, "Keep away from me and my family, we don't need you." And other times she's saying, "It's okay, Shane, you can talk to Carl." And it seems to be no really clear reason. It may be a bit of slightly better writing would have improved it, but it seems to be she's just changeable and kind of annoying. There are other things I didn't like. Andrea, there's one bit that really bothered me where one of the Herschel's daughters is suicidal after all what's happened. She just wants to die, and they obviously have to keep an eye on her and stay with her. And Andrea gets left with her, and Andrea leaves her in a place where with a bathroom unlocked, where there's a mirror, she can break the glass, which she does, and cuts her own wrist. But then when they break in, she's holding her wrist and saying, she clearly wants to live. And Andrew's justification is like for leaving a suicidal person. You could just find out whether, you've got to see whether she wants to live anyway. Which is ridiculous. You don't leave suicidal people like that. And Andrew, of all people, should know that, because she wanted to die, but Dale forced her to live. By his actions, he forced her to live. And 3 or 4 weeks later, or whatever the timeline is, I'm not quite sure, she wants to live, but at that time she really wanted to die. So she should know above all people that, it's not a case of, I really want to live, it's like a call for help. That's nonsense. So I really didn't like that, and I've kind of gone off Laurie. And in the end, she's possibly redeemable. I don't know. We'll see. The final reveal, and I don't mean of the fact that everyone's got the virus, of a prison in the distance. It's kind of interesting. I was fully expecting this, even though I hadn't read any spoilers. The reason is that's kind of the next major part of the saga in the comic books. Once they leave the farm, they come across a prison, and it seemed like a natural thing to set up a lot of drama. Because of what happens in the comic books, I think it'll go much the same way, actually. And I'm kind of digging this. There are significant differences to the comic book. Daryl, for one, doesn't exist as a character in the comic books, and I can kind of see it playing out almost exactly like the comic books. But I'm kind of pleased that they've made it different enough to maintain my interest. I think I'll watch it anyway. To be honest, it's good enough just to watch, even if you know what's going to happen fairly accurately. But I do appreciate the differences they've put in, and I think they've been for the better. They've changed around the timelines a little and stuff like that, and it's working out for me. I have to say, I quite like it. So overall, I'll say again, I'll give this 90 out of 100. I have to say, if you look at zombie stuff, and what I mean by that is probably films, 99% out of 100 of the time, zombie movies are pretty terrible. They're not. There are some outstanding ones, and there's about 7 or 8 very, very good zombie movies. But there are hundreds of zombie movies, and most of them are pretty bad. This is in the top tier. This TV series is in the top tier. It's great. It's really terrific, and I would recommend it. If you don't mind your gore and your blood, and you'd like some good solid drama, I definitely recommend this series. Okay, bye. You can visit us at our website www.thegoodthebadandtheodd.com, or you can leave us feedback on info@thegoodthebadandtheodd.com. Any feedback you leave will be greatly appreciated, and we should be sure to mention you. We'd also very much like any iTunes reviews.